Hi, I'm James, and in these tutorials we're going to go through the very basics of Maya. So these tutorials are aimed at someone that's probably never used Maya before. You can be completely new to 3D or animation, or you could be coming from a package like Blender or 3ds Max and you just want to sort of convert the skills that you've got in those packages over to Maya, so you just need to know where different tools are and the Maya interface. So the first one I'm going to go over is sort of the Maya interface, what some of the basic tools do, and then what some of the basic modeling tools, animation and rendering tools. So by the end of these tutorials I'll have a basic understanding of where things are in Maya, so you can start building your own little projects or start developing your own skills on your own. So to begin with, this is what Maya looks like when you first open it, and in these tutorials we'll be using Maya 2013, but a lot of the stuff is pretty similar in previous versions of Maya. We're not going to go into any really advanced tools that are sort of the things that you get between different packages of Maya. So probably from Maya 2008, the basic tools and the basic layout of Maya is pretty much consistent throughout all packages. So if you're using a previous version of Maya, don't worry, there might be a few different differences, but it's going to be pretty much exactly the same and pretty much easy to follow along. So the first time you open Maya, you're presented with this Essential Skills movie, which I recommend for first time users just clicking and playing through these videos, which are just really simple videos about how to obviously navigate through your Maya scene, rotate different tools and creating objects. But once you become a bit more comfortable with the tools, you can just go do not show this at startup and just close that. Okay, so to start off with, Maya's going to look pretty confusing because there's a lot of tools everywhere, there's all these different shelves, all these buttons, but that's really one of the powerful things about Maya is everything's got its own tool and it's really easy to access, and there's several different ways to access the same tool. So here you can see polygons, we've got different images, so straight away you can tell that's a sphere, a cube, a cylinder, so it's really self-explanatory. If we do want to create these, there's different menus to create them, several different ways that we're going to go into. So first off, to start off with, along the top we have the conventional things like file, edit, where you're going to be opening your scenes, saving your scenes or exporting. Obviously like edit, copy and paste, generic things that you're going to find in a lot of other programs. And you can go through these, and these are going to stay the same throughout Maya, but as we start to come along you can start to see things like animate, geometry dash, deformers. Now these are all animation specific menus. So if we look to the left, there's actually a drop down box that says animation. So if we click on this drop down, you'll see if we switch to polygons, the menus to the right are going to convert to polygon menus. And the same if we go to surfaces, it's surface menus and dynamics. So because Maya's, you can do different sections, like you can do animation, you can do modeling, you can do rendering. It's going to take a lot more space up to fit all this inside one UI. So towards the left you can sort of switch between what area you're currently working on, which is a really easy way to sort of switch between them. So below here we've got new file, open, save, different things like how we want to select different objects. So if we go to animation, you can see over here different icons changing, and the best thing to do when you're learning Maya or any other program is just to click the buttons, see what they do, see what changes, and just start to learn what each bit does. So over here, this is sort of our selection in Maya. It's going to determine what we can select and how we're going to select things. So here you can see we've got some icons. So the first one, selection handles, joints, curves, surfaces, etc. So each icon sort of looks like where it is. So we've got some joints here, we've got a curve, sort of like a square face that looks like a polygon, so it's all self-explanatory. As you can see, as I hover over these, we're actually getting a little tooltip, so select curve objects. So again, if you get stuck, just want to hover over things. So if I hover over different icons, down here it tells you what the tool is, gives you a bit of a description. And another way to access this is if you hover over, and if you look at the bottom left down here, you can actually see as you hover over different tools, it's going to give you the title and a bit of a description what that tool's going to do. So if you ever get stuck or you don't know what a tool does, just hover over it, wait for the tooltip to pop up, or look to the bottom left. Okay, so if these tooltips don't come up, as you can see, as I'm hovering over this tooltip down here, you can get this little move icon. Sometimes you might accidentally close these. So you can see if I right click on this little icon down here, so you can see these little white dots next to each sort of subsection of the window. So you've got shelf to the left, shelf up here. They've all got these little sort of braided white dots, and this allows us to, if you left click, we can sort of move these about and move them around the scene. And one of the problems is when you first, or when I started using Maya at first, is I accidentally closed one of these, and it took me a while to figure out how to get it back up. So one thing you can always do is right click on these, and you can start to see which ones are ticked. So status shelf, you see helpline, there's one below, so if we ever want to get that back, we can just go to helpline and bring these windows back. Okay, so moving on, I'll continue with these. As we said, so this next icon is basically just switching between presets. So this is going to quickly help you change different selection types in Maya when you're working on different things. So when you're animating, for example, click to animation preset, and you get joints, you get polygons, and you get selection handles, which are going to be the main things that you want to select when you're animating. Go down again, polygons, and it switches to a different type. So these are just really quick presets, and it doesn't matter if you don't understand what these mean at the moment, because we're going to be getting that into later on. But all you need to know is this sort of switch between easy accessible presets. So I'll switch that to all objects. So moving along again, we have these three icons, and if you get stuck again, you just hover over them, see what the tooltip says. Select hierarchy and combinations, object type, and component type. Now what these mean is if you come from another package, it's pretty much self-explanatory. It's usually the same in other packages where things are parent together. You've got sort of a hierarchy of objects. But if you're quite new to 3D, you need to understand that a hierarchy is where things are in a hierarchy, basically. So if you're in a job, you've got your boss might have a manager, and each stage up is sort of higher up in the hierarchy. So you'll have, and then if that manager is part of a company, you might have a CEO. So that CEO might have 10 managers. Each one of those 10 managers has a boss and then more workers. So how you go up in the chain is sort of the parent of the object, the guy that controls everything. So when we're doing things like selections, basically means if we've got, so I'll just create a few objects in here to make it a bit more easy to understand. And all I'm doing is duplicating these. You don't have to follow all these steps, and it's okay if you don't understand at the moment. It's just to visually show you. So all I'm doing is parenting these, and again we're going to go into more depth of this later on, so don't worry if you don't know what buttons I'm pressing. It's just to show you as an example. You can see that if I select the top, which would be sort of the CEO of the company, you can see it's going to select all the other objects below it. Then go one down below this sphere, and it's going to select those three. And this one's the parent, so he doesn't get selected. This guy only controls the ones below it. So if you think sort of like a hierarchy structure with a job or anything like that, then the next guy, and then the next guy. So you can see how this sort of works. Now, at the moment we're in object. So if I hover over this, select by object type. So you see here I'm just selecting objects. That's all that's happening here really. If I switch this to hierarchy, you get these three icons in here which have changed again. So what's going to happen now is you can see that by clicking this guy here, it's not selecting him, it's selecting the parent, the top of the chain. So every time I try and select one of these guys that are lower down, it's not going to let me. It's going to always pick the top of the hierarchy, the top of the chain. And if we hover over this, you can see select hierarchy root. So a root's another name of the top of the hierarchy, the very top. So you'll think, so if you see something like root, it's always going to mean, you know, the thing that's controlling everything. Everything's underneath the root. You can switch this to leaf, and it's going to do a similar thing, but instead of selecting hierarchy, it's just going to select the object we want to. So you can sort of imagine this as a tree. So again, just clicking over here and opening up the outliner, and again, don't worry if it looks a bit confusing because we're going to go into this a bit more detail, but you can imagine this as folders on Windows as well. that this is the top folder, this is another folder inside it, inside it, inside it. If we collapse the top folder, you can see everything's sort of inside that folder. Same like hierarchy, this is the boss, you know, everything's underneath that. And then there's the next selection where we can just select. So hover over this again, we can select it so it's templated. So go to the second option, which is object mode. Now, what object mode means, and don't worry if this menu's coming up every time I press space bar, we'll get into that later on as well. So what object mode means is if you have a polygon object, which are these spheres here, a polygon object, if we zoom into it, is going to be, again in the next tutorial we're going to go over sort of the navigation mode, so don't worry if I'm zooming into this and you don't know how to zoom in. So a polygon object is basically an object that's made up of different things, different elements, and those elements is going to be faces. As you can see here in wireframe mode, every sort of grey face, every grey cube, that's a face. It's made up of edges and vertices. And if we go to object mode, it means you're moving this entire object, so everything that's associated with that object, it's all inside that object. So if we move this sphere about, we're moving everything. If we go to component mode, you can see now this is going to change. And what I can start to do now is, also you'll notice on the right that this menu changes again. So switching to component mode, we'll hover over these. You can see select point components. You can see this is sort of checked down when you click it. So when it's got that grey box around it, it means it's selected. You can go through and select more of these or deselect these. So the first one we can see, if we hover over it again, is select point component. So what point component is a vertex. So on this sphere we can select these individual vertexes. So this is what component and object mode means. An object is the entire thing. What that object's made up? It's made up of faces, verts, edges, UVs. That's the entire object. We're going to move that entire thing. Then in component mode we're going to move individual elements. So this is the way that you can sort of tweak individual components. Then again, moving along, so we'll try some other ones. There's edges, you can move to faces, and you can see if we actually select two of these, you can see that both are selected. So this means we can hover over, select an edge, and select a face as well by switching between these different modes. Now, one thing to bear in mind as well, it's quite helpful, is you can see as we move this cursor around, it might be a bit hard to see with the vertices that sort of turn red. We have the vertex on, I'll try faces. You can see as we're moving along, Maya's updating what we're currently over. So we can sort of, gives us a really easy way to understand what we're going to be selecting. Go to edges, the same again. Now, as we mentioned earlier, Maya has a lot of ways to do the same thing, which sort of makes Maya quite powerful because each person, you know, approaches things in different ways. And another way to access this sort of selection, this component type, is to right click on an object and hold. So you can see by right clicking, you get this marking menu. So marking menu is basically when you sort of click on an object and the menus are going to be dependent on what you're hovering over. So if I click in the middle of the grid and right click on this sphere, you can see that the menus are different. So it depends where you're right clicking. So here you can see right click and hold and drag to one of these menus. We can quickly switch to faces, and now you can see it's going to update up here. Now I can select faces. Right click, go to vertex. So there's different ways to do the same thing inside Maya. So someone might prefer to right click and go to edges, or someone might prefer to go up here and manually click different things that they want to select. And then once we're done, we can go back to object mode, or again you can click the object mode button at the top. Okay, so in the next tutorial we're going to go through the sort of camera movements and a few more of these options on the top shelf. So again, these tutorials are going to be really basic sort of really introduction to Maya if you've never used it before, and hopefully by the end of these tutorials you'll be able to start modeling and start learning your own sort of making your own sort of projects.